The passive and active voice. In this nugget, we are going to be looking at what the passive and active voices are and how and when to use them. If you are writing using the active voice, the subject of the sentence is performing the action. So for example, the fireman saved David. The fireman in this sentence is performing the action. If you are writing using the passive voice, the subject of the sentence has something done to it by someone or something. So in this example, David was saved by the fireman. The subject David has something done to him by the fireman. Now in English, the verb in the sentence will either be written in the active or passive form. But did you know? The passive and active verb can be used in any tense, past, present or future. This is why it is called the active voice or the passive voice, rather than the active tense or the passive tense. Sentences written in the active voice will be in the order subject, verb, object. So if we look at this example, bees make honey. Bees are the subject of the sentence. The bees are doing the action, making, to the object, honey. Make is the verb. It is the action of the sentence. And honey is the object. It is receiving the action being made. In sentences that use the active voice, the subject of the sentence is doing the action of the verb. So if we look at this example, the fireman saved David. The fireman is the subject of the sentence. The fireman is doing the action, saving, to the object, David. Using the active voice can often result in shorter, sharper sentences, which are easier and clearer for the reader to follow. The passive voice is used when we want to focus the attention on the person or thing affected by the action. It is used less frequently than the active voice, but it is important to know that a sentence can only be made passive if it has a direct object in it. If you are writing in the passive voice, the object of the verb changes into the subject. So for example, if we look at the sentence we've already looked at, the fireman saved David. To change this sentence from active into passive voice, the object, David, becomes the subject. David was saved by the fireman. The subject of the sentence is now David, and he has the action saving done to him by the fireman. The focus is therefore shifted from the fireman's heroism to David being saved. Let's look at another example. Bees make delicious honey. This sentence is in the active, as the bees are the subject doing the action. However, in the passive voice, the sentence would be, delicious honey is made by bees. The object, honey, becomes the subject. So the focus is shifted from the bees to the tastiness of the honey. If we look at another example, the people counted the votes. Here, the people are the subject in the active voice. If we change this sentence into the passive voice, it would be, the votes were counted by the people. In the passive voice, the emphasis is shifted onto the votes because they have become the subject. When using the passive voice, if the original subject is an unnamed person or object, then it can be removed. This can sometimes make the sentence clearer or more formal. If we look at the example we've already looked at, the votes were counted by the people who counted the votes are not named. Therefore, it's not really important who did the counting. The important fact is that the votes have been counted, so the original subject, the people, can be removed. This allows us to focus on the important point that the votes have been counted. Now let's look at another reason we might use the passive. By using the passive voice, an author can manipulate sympathy towards the object. So let's look at an example. The vicious lion chased the terrified deer. And in the passive voice, this would be, the terrified deer was chased by the vicious lion. These two sentences are very similar, as they use the same words, but crucially, they're in a different order. In the first example, the active voice focuses our attention on the vicious lion. However, in the second example, the passive voice shifts the emphasis from the lion's ferocity onto the deer's fear. In this case, the passive voice would be appropriate if the writer wanted to manipulate sympathy towards the deer. So the reader would feel sorry for the deer. Now, some verbs can't be written in the passive. Some verbs need an object to make sense. These verbs can never be passive. They are always written in the active voice. So, for example, if I say I take, the sentence feels unfinished because I haven't explained what I'm taking. However, if I add dance lesson as the object in the sentence, they complete the sentence to become I take dance lessons. Similarly, I dropped is an unfinished sentence. It needs an object after to explain what I dropped. If I say I dropped the ball is the object of this sentence, and it completes the sentence. So, to summarise. In English, the verb in a sentence will either be written in the active or the passive form. A sentence is written in the active voice when the subject of the sentence is performing the action. A sentence is written in the passive voice when the subject of the sentence has something done to it by someone or something.